Today I'm speaking with Meagan Brown. Meagan works for Mortarstone, and I'll let her tell you what they do. But Meagan is extremely knowledgeable in church stewardship and giving. She's an expert, and Mortarstone, they work with hundreds of churches and in this area of giving and of stewardship. And they're working with churches on how to be more engaging with their donors. I mean, you might not think this is an important topic to watch, but let me tell you, I think churches need to take giving and online giving and stewardship and data around giving very seriously. The transfer of wealth in our country over the next decade is immense, and you need to think differently. If I would have told you back in February that starting in March, no churches in our country will be able to meet in person for months to come, you would have thought I was crazy. Well, I'm telling you that you just can't keep doing online giving or giving in general like you have in the past. Times are changing. So I'm really excited to have you hear from Meagan. Enjoy. Well, hey, I am here with Meagan. Meagan, how are you today?
I am really good. Today is a good day. It's not Monday, so it's a good, and we could call it Tuesday. You put yay at the end of anything and it makes you feel good.
Well, thanks for joining us today. So excited about this particular topic because it's close to my heart when it comes to generosity and stewardship and just helping churches or parachurch organizations get better in this space. And the church absolutely needs it, especially in this time of here we are in September of 2020 in the middle of a pandemic, and churches all of them have had to switch and kind of change gears or pivot. And so this concept of giving is really real to them right now because people are not in their building for the most part. Mm-hmm. So first of all, talk to me a little bit about Mortarstone. What is the mission of Mortarstone? What is it you do to serve churches?
Absolutely. Well, thanks for letting me share. So Mortarstone is really a 3-part company. And we start with an analytical framework of saying we need to start to inspect what we expect. And so that's really the heartbeat of how Mortarstone was founded, is saying, let's take a look at this thing called giving and the precious men and women who are attached to it, the givers. And let's see if we're really doing what we think we're doing well. Let's analyze it and see if we're doing it well. Are we measuring things that are important, and are we able to put some framework around that to say, man, we expect this. Are we inspecting it to make sure that it's hitting all cylinders? So we do analytics. The second thing that we do as a company is we do professional engagement consulting around how to do giver development strategies and generosity and stewardship ministries as it relates to the 3 big ways a church can fund all the things that we have to do for ministry. So the 3 big things would be, how are we going to reach our annual funding goals? How are we going to reach all of our capital needs that we might have for buildings or renovations or capital projects at large? And then how are we going to create long-term sustainability funding to where we are able to grow as a church and not have debt, but be able to truly be the hands and feet of Jesus in our community? So we do things from an analytical framework. You know, we look at things through a truth lens, and then we apply the Spirit. So Spirit and truth. And then we look at things through how can we coach to these through specific strategies, through giver segmentation, through those 3 major areas that need to be funded. And then the third thing that Mortarstone does is gift administration. So that attaches to long-term funding, but we help the end giver to meet their desired needs of their heart for what God has placed on them. You know, there are these men and women who have the gift of giving, and they want to see big things happen. And so we help them to meet, for lack of a better term, their philanthropic goals through the local church, which truly is the heartbeat of what we're called to do as a church, is fund the gospel. And so we help attach those givers through gift administration to see those needs met in the church.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, you guys are onto something here, because I mean, obviously when Jesus in the Gospels, he talks about money more than it's an issue with people, right? Money is a vehicle, but it can be one of those things where it can really take you the wrong direction. So it seems like you're in such a critical time helping churches understand how to be a better steward to their people, on helping them learn generosity, learn stewardship, learn about the tithe, learn about the offering. And using this data is really, really important. What are some, like, so, okay, now we're in this season right now with COVID. What are some best practices churches can use right now to connect with because you can't connect with people one-on-one in a building, right? So you got to work on doing it digitally speaking. Any ideas?
Absolutely. Well, number one, if you have givers who are starting to give for the very first time, that is the biggest group of giver segmentation that you can reach out to. Because what we've seen as a trend is that overall, most churches are up in their general fund budget, but it's coming off of the backs of a few from their top giver constituents. New givers are not coming in because the doors aren't open. And so that we know there's no way that new givers can even start to give if it's not talked about during the sermon or the offering moment or the prayer, or there's not a place that's flashing on the screen or an on-demand button where they can learn more about what's happening at the local church in this area of giving, what the church is doing during this time. So the number one thing that a church can do during this season is connect with their new givers if any of them have started to give. If you have them, and by connecting, you need more than one strategy. So it can't just be reach out to them and thank them or send them an email.
And is it okay to ask new people to give?
Absolutely. If you believe in what you're doing as a church and what you're doing is impacting your community, your city, and ultimately your overall visions for a church, that hasn't changed. Your vision for the church should not have changed just because of a few months. You still have a goal to do ministry for the people who are coming to the church. You still have a goal, or attending online. You still have a goal for your community, for your city, and for your outreaches. And that goal is something that we are better together at. When we unite together, we're better to lock arms and give towards those things together than we are trying to do it individually. So asking people to give towards the ultimate goals of funding the gospel of Christ and helping with ministries is something that we should not be ashamed of doing.
Well, and I kind of learned this in my days working in a church, and I felt like sometimes we didn't want to ask because, oh no, this is just for people who call this their home church. But what I learned through a good friend of ours, Dave Briggs, was we were robbing people of their opportunity to worship God, even if they don't have a relationship with him and they don't say that this is my home church. By not allowing them to participate, we were taking something from them. Right. And to me, that was a lesson I learned going, wait a minute here. What are we doing here? We're actually causing them not to rejoice and praise God for what they've been blessed with.
Absolutely. I think that we have to be aware during this season as a church that we have the most important thing that we are working to fund. And nonprofit organizations are never, ever, ever, ever afraid to ask for you to support their mission. Whether it's the local animal shelter or the homeless shelter or the Red Cross or whatever, they're not ashamed to ask or to say, you should be joining this mission. So believers and unbelievers are constantly giving towards those missions. But we have 52 weeks a year where people are seeking our services. And now the online viewership is probably going through the roof. People are wanting to attach themselves to what's true and authentic and real. And that is the hope of Jesus Christ. And so if we can ask them to join that mission, even if they're not a believer yet, they still will be able to be excited about seeing somebody's life be transformed, or a single mom be given a car, or a child be given a laptop so they can work virtually from home. I mean, people want to celebrate other people. So we get to do that as a church.
So talk to us about what churches, how transparent should they be when they're talking to new, maybe even younger families that are perhaps a little bit more sophisticated, not necessarily sophisticated, but they want to learn. They want to know what their giving is going to. What can churches do to be more transparent in that space?
Well, certainly you need to be highlighting those things through stories, video stories that you're sharing, impact of lives being changed. Those are things that should be displayed on the give page on your website. Those should be the videos. They should be stories or links. There should be testimonials. There should be opportunities to be able to say, this is what we believe as a church, and then this is how we've accomplished that as a church body. So those are some simple ways to be able to think through that.
And then when you work with churches, I want to go back to the data and analytics part. What's a typical story that you hear when you work with a church? Like when you're digging into their data, what's one thing that pops in your mind that this always happens to this church and what they can learn from? What's something that we can take away with learning about data?
Communicating your story is going to be the biggest opportunity that you have. And we know that as believers, but if you've not communicated your story well to the masses, you're only going to be funded by a few. And there are discipleship gaps when it comes to finances that we need to be able to shore up for people who have maybe never learned or have learned incorrectly about what the Bible has to say when it comes to money. And so something that I see inevitably all the time, most churches, is that they are funded by a few and not by the masses. And so if the masses, which we would consider, we call these things bands, levels of which people are giving at to support the local church. If your bands 4 and 5 are the ones who are carrying the heavy load of the general fund budget, then we have a discipleship problem on the opposite end. There are people who are either not discipled well when it comes to the area of finances, or they're strapped financially. And either one of those things are things that the church should care about helping their members and givers to do better at. So we care about many other things. We care about marriage and kids. We care about jobs. We care about all these other things. But this is one of the number one areas that people get into trouble with. And it can cause a lot of shame, guilt, or condemnation, none of which are of Jesus. So if we can disciple through that, then we're able to help put those people on a pathway to their relationship with God in that area.
So what's a success story from a church that comes to your mind of, yeah, we started working with this church and they started to get it? And while you're thinking of that, I often, when I talk to churches, we kind of stay in the lane of church growth. But see, to me, this is a huge area part of church growth, is helping somebody understand what biblical stewardship looks like. And it always, when I look at what churches are preaching on, hardly ever do I see a sermon series on money. It's just like churches just don't go there very often. And I don't know why. Maybe pastors are afraid to talk about it because maybe their own personal finances aren't in order, or the church's finances are a little out of whack. So how often should a church be talking about this, the idea of money? And then what is a success story that Mortarstone has been a part of with a church where they totally got it, and when they went from here to there, in their journey of working with you?
Yeah, for sure. Well, so the success story is one thing, and then please remind me, the other part of the question was?
Well, just the idea where how often should a church be talking about money,
Okay.
maybe even from the pulpit?
Okay. Well, I have to believe that our vision has to be funded, right, as Christians. So does our vision ever not need to be funded? No. So then should we be talking about it? Absolutely. We have 52 weeks out of the year to be able to share the vision and the needs, to paint the picture, to paint the success. So there should be something not completely in your face. We don't ever want to feel like we're fundraising. Fundraising is never fun, right?
Yeah.
And being fundraised makes you feel icky, and you almost feel like grateful when you're through with the project, like, oh, I'm done with that. Well, no, we need to be faith raised. We need to be excited. So when we're talking about money, it should be almost as like the air that we're breathing. We talk about money affects every area of our lives, every person's area of their life every day. And so we as a church need to embrace that and share with them biblical principles and truths. And it doesn't have to be sermon series every single week, but there are things you can do communicating the stories throughout the week, or the needs throughout the week, or through the ministries, or highlighting the impact of the stories. And that needs to be done on a very consistent and regular basis. It's part of transparency and authenticity. And those two things need to be easy to get to. And especially in the digital age in which we live, you've got to have your website ready to be able to share what you believe about this area, what you're doing to support through all those amazing ministries that you have, the needs that there still are to be met, and then the future of where we're going. So we always want to celebrate and paint a success story for the future. Thinking about a success story with somebody who we've been able to really work with, and anybody who we work with, it's just a true, genuine opportunity to say, thank you, Lord, for allowing us to go miles deep and wide with your precious sons and daughters, because it is just, talking about this area is like opening up a deep spot in your heart and saying, like, here's my stuff, you know? So a success story would be that one of the churches that we started working with on an analytic basis realized the true need for new givers, and being able to not only reach out to them one time, but to be able to reach out to them throughout the consistency of an entire year. So they went as deep as having a 12-month strategy for connecting with those people who'd given a very first time gift ever. And their retention rate went through the roof. So, and this wasn't a small church. This was about a $3.5 to $4 million church. It was a single campus location church, which is even more like, oh, wow, your retention went through the roof. And they got to where they had a 50% retention rate with first-time givers at the end of the year. And that's incredible, because what we typically see is that the retention rates are somewhere for first-time givers anywhere between 18 and 30%. And so this church grew to a 50% retention rate over the course of a year, developing out a strategy to be able to share the story and the impact and the successes of what was happening with the dollars that were being entrusted to their care.
Sounds like just putting forethought into and thinking and implementing those strategies that Mortarstone has pays for itself time and time again, because you're not only are you getting people to buy in with their money, their hard-earned money, and giving it to the church and investing in the church, but now you probably have a family that's there for a lifetime, right? Yeah. They are bought in. So yeah, that's really impressive.
Well, it's not an easy button, right? It's not like the easy button that you can press. It does require work. And with givers, you're planting seeds. And those seeds have to be watered and cultivated before you'll ever see a harvest of fruit from them. Yeah. So it's worth it. It's worth the effort if you're willing to go forward with it. And it will take time, but you will reap a harvest from those seeds which you've sown.
Yeah. And I think one of the things you said I thought was really important, and that is your website. So often you go to a church website and there's a give button, you click on it, and it basically just takes you, it's just like you go to a page where now you can enter in you can log in, or you can enter a dollar amount and hit send, and you've just did a transaction. But that was a money transaction. That wasn't a spiritual transaction, if you will.
Yes.
And I don't know if I'm saying that right, but what I am saying though is I like it when I go to a church website, I hit the give button and I see here's where your money is going towards. We had this many baptisms, we had this many salvations, we had this many impacts with our local schools, whatever it might be, this many outreach, all the different things that the money's going towards. That really I get excited. I'm just checking out your church because we work with churches all over the country. And I get excited about your church just by seeing the results. And I know those are just numbers, but that number represents a human, a child of God that's been changed for the better. And so before I even want to give that gift, you're cultivating me to change my heart. And I think that's I didn't connect that dot till you just said that. That actually is a really powerful thing.
I think that most people, Jason, would, and your website should try to address this, is that most people, even Christians who give, would say, I understand that God owns it all. God owns everything.
Yeah.
But are we living that way? Does your pocketbook, does your checkbook, does your app, does it follow that? Are you practicing what you believe? Not practicing what you preach. Are you practicing what you believe? If you believe that God owns all of it, are you living that way? And how to give, the way that you said it, is a money transaction. Yes, that is what most churches have gotten really good at doing. And please don't hear me wrong. We have to be able to do that in a society in which we live, in the culture in which we live. We have to be able to have quick, easy, accessible ways to give. But how to give shouldn't be, is it from your bank account, your credit card, your cash, your check, your e-check? Yes, those are practical ways. But how to give should be more along the lines of, how do I give out of the abundance of which God has entrusted me with? How do I give this back? How much is enough for me? And then, God, where is the rest of it supposed to go? And that's what your giving website should be working towards, is teaching people what you as a church body, as the leaders, as the pastors and the elders and the ministers, this is what we believe. We believe that in this, and this is what we're doing with it. How much is enough for us as a church? How much is enough for us as individuals? And then how do we live our life out to give it away rather than trying to acquire items on the balance sheet? How do we give those things to the kingdom of heaven?
Yeah.
How do we give them to the men and the women, the sons and the daughters? And explaining those things is a spiritual transaction of how to give, not a practical transaction of how to give.
Yeah. Wow.
And I know I'm like on the bandwagon here, but I have to say this too. How to give, if we're going to address how to give from check or cash or ACH or credit card, then we also need to be able to address how to give from the assets in which we have accumulated over the course of our lifetime. How do we give to be able to say, this was a boat that I had and I'm selling it, and maybe the Lord would have me to sell it so that I can give the dollars to the church and avoid a taxable consequence.
Right.
Got to be smart about how to give from those things too.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems like we're obviously in a new day with COVID. I don't know if it's ever there's a new normal in sight, and whatever that's going to be, churches have to pivot. And I think this is one of those areas where if they've had to, in fact, we had a lot of churches reach out to us going, hey, Missional Mark, can you help me, with my website and create an online give button? Going, how did you not have this before COVID? But you didn't. Okay. So it's caused every church to have to pivot. I think now more than ever, a church has to continue to look towards the future and make more pivots in this area of giving. And really, in my opinion, leaning on Mortarstone to help navigate that water, because I think a lot of churches they haven't really thought through it all the way. So what would you recommend a church does first to engage with you guys, and how do they go about doing that?
Well, the first thing that they would do to engage with us would just simply be you can reach out to me by email, or you can go to our website and we've got like an automatic chat button that you can chat in with somebody, like, hey, I'd like to speak with somebody right now. And we can get you connected immediately to be able to set up an opportunity to meet with. If you want to look at an analytical overview, that's really an easy place to start. And so you can do that by simply going to our website, filling out a demo request form, or typing into the live chat, or you can even email me personally. And I'm happy to give my email here at the end of this time. We are here to help support you. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing to want to really think through, though, is what is it that we're doing as a local church, as an individual church body, that is worthy of us wanting to display our case for people to give their money to? What is that? And so you have to start to wrestle with those questions. Most churches have really good vision or mission statements, but what are you doing with it?
Yeah.
And then how are you funding it? Great. We have a vision and mission statement. We want the power, presence, and purpose of God, or we want to experience church and find community and give to the world. Like, you probably know your mission statement, but what are you doing to fund it? And what are you doing to see the impact of the lives being changed and sharing that? Because it all takes money to be able to fund those things. And so we have to make that pivot and that click in our mind in that regard.
Yeah, you've said this before too, and my days before this, in the fundraising world was building a case for support, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so in the parachurch or the nonprofit or non-church nonprofit world, that's a key term. The case for support, the case for why somebody should support your mission. And I think in churches we're not very good at that at all.
No. And it's almost like you feel like we can't because that feels like fundraising. And that's just silly. Like, that's just silly. Like, no, that's a good business practice. And we have to be good. We should be the best businessmen and women that there are.
Right.
So don't shy away from building your case for support. You nailed it earlier. You've got baptisms and salvations. You've seen lives transformed and changed, and marriages being saved, and kids getting delivered, and sex trafficking being stopped. And we have reasons to celebrate and continue to ask for support so that more of that can take place.
Yeah, that is a church's case for support.
Correct.
And most churches go, I don't ever really talk about that stuff,
Right.
Maybe once a year. Not good enough, because what are the other 51 weeks that you're not communicating that?
And on by and large, in a virtual environment, you're being infiltrated with people saying, well, I'm just really not being able to connect with my local church any longer, so I'm going to go find a different church. And we have to be able to have this concept down. We have to be businessmen and women minded with a Christ heartbeat. Mm-hmm. So, think about all the businessmen and women that Jesus pulled as his first disciples. I think about Matthew, the tax collector. He managed money. And then he saw Jesus radically shift that view. He was a businessman. And then he was able to use it for the glory of the kingdom of heaven.
Oh, yeah. He encountered Jesus. That's the name of the game. Wow. Any last thoughts?
I think the only last thought that I would say is that the shift of the church for the next decade is truly going to be the transfer of wealth that is happening in America right now, and really across the whole globe. And if we do not have a reason to be supported, if we don't have a clear defined plan, if we don't have transparency and authenticity, if we don't know how to administer gifts or ask for gifts, if we don't know how to build these pieces out as a church and then communicate that well through all mediums, then we will see that by and large, many church doors will shut. And that would never be the heart of the kingdom of heaven. And so we have an opportunity of a lifetime that we should take advantage of during the lifetime of the opportunity to start to dig in on how to do these things well as a church. So the church should be the church. They should be the recipient of the gifts to do the ministry for the people. Yeah. But you still have to have business practices to be able to receive those things and have the gifts be transferred so that the ministry can take place. And that's what Mortarstone really wants to seek to help you to do. The church is the hands and feet of Jesus in mobilization, and you're really good at doing that. You need somebody to help you administer those gifts from the givers so that you can see more impact in your church first, your community second, and then the world at which the Lord is directing you towards.
Well said. In church, I'm telling you, you don't want to delay on this one. Every day that goes by, you're already behind, right? It's so true. If you've not put your efforts into this, and maybe you don't have a stewardship pastor, you've got to take this step. And so I highly recommend you connect with Meagan, you connect with Mortarstone. Meagan, thank you so much for your time and your insight. extremely valuable. Appreciate
Thank
you.
you for letting me be a part of it today, and bless all of you and all the work that you put your hands to.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much. All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again, Meagan. Such great information. Now, hey, church, if this isn't your area, you don't oversee giving or you don't oversee stewardship or anything financial at your church, that's okay. Pass this podcast on to those that do. They're going to learn about this and they're going to learn something new and they're going to bear some fruit from this conversation that Meagan and I got to have. And so I encourage you to do that. Second, I encourage you to go check out Mortarstone. Go to mortarstone.com. If anything, take that free church health audit. It's absolutely worth it. And I guarantee when you do that, you are going to learn a thing or two. And your future of your church really depends on how you're going to pivot to become better at this thing called giving. So until next time, God bless.